The first step, the hushed opulence of Kingsley's, a Manhattan landmark for the elite, was shattered not by a crash, but by silence. A profound, heavy quiet fell over the restaurant, freezing conversations and halting the clink of silverware. All eyes were on a small table near the window where Lucas Montgomery, 10 years old and encased in the cold gleam of leg braces, extended a trembling hand. His target was Diana Johnson, a waitress whose 5 years at Kingsley's had taught her the art of blending into the background. As a soft piano melody began to fill the room, a sudden, bold impulse had seized Lucas. He wanted to dance. "Sir, control your son," came the sharp whisper of Manager Thornton, a man whose polished exterior hid a core of steel. "This is not a dance hall. Our employees are not here to entertain." Richard Montgomery, owner of Montgomery Investments and one of the country's wealthiest men, stiffened. This was the first time he'd brought Lucas out in public since the accident 2 years ago that had partially paralyzed his legs. It was, he now concluded, a terrible mistake. "Lucas, sit down," he ordered, his voice low and firm. Diana, however, remained rooted. Her gaze moved from the manager to the billionaire, and then to Lucas, whose small hand hung suspended in the air. For a moment, she was just Diana, the woman who worked 3 jobs and was on the brink of losing the one at Kingsley's. But something in Lucas's eyes, a mix of hope and profound shame, reached her. Calmly, she removed her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it on her tray. "Mr. Thornton, my shift is over," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Then, to the astonishment of every person in the room, she smiled at Lucas and took his hand. "I can't dance in an apron." Richard stood up abruptly, a storm brewing in his eyes. "What do you think you're doing?" Diana met his glare without flinching. "Accepting an invitation, sir." Before anyone could intervene, Lucas took a halting step forward. His foot dragged, the metal of his braces screeching against the marble floor. Diana didn't try to lead him or rush him. She simply adjusted her own rhythm to his painful, deliberate pace. "She's fired tomorrow," a woman at a nearby table whispered, but the words seemed to fade into the background. Richard was frozen, a forgotten memory surfacing in his mind. His late wife, Elizabeth, dancing with a younger Lucas in their living room. "It's not about perfection," she had told him, "it's about connection." As Diana followed Lucas' clumsy lead, something remarkable happened. Fear drained from the boy's eyes, replaced by an intense concentration. For the first time since his accident, he wasn't being guided, helped, or corrected. He was leading. After 3 slow, triumphant steps, Diana gently guided Lucas back to his table. "Thank you for the dance," she said, her tone formal, as if speaking to an equal. "It was an honor." As she turned to leave, Richard's voice stopped her. "Wait." He looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time. "What's your full name?" "Diana Johnson, sir." He took a card from his jacket and held it out to her. "My office. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. The next day, Diana found herself in the lobby of Montgomery Tower, a fortress of glass and steel. She felt out of place in her best navy skirt and white blouse, a stark contrast to the sleek business attire of the people around her. "Diana Johnson to see Mr. Montgomery," she announced to a glacial receptionist. Richard's office took up half the floor, with windows overlooking all of Manhattan. He stood with his back to her, a silhouette against the skyline. "Miss Johnson," he said, turning around, his face a mask of studied control. "Thank you for coming." The silence that followed was a calculated tactic, a game of power. Diana recognized it instantly. I did some research on you, Richard finally said, picking up a folder from his desk. Bachelor's degree in child development from NYU. Incomplete master's in special education. He looked at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. And you work as a waitress. I work 3 jobs, Diana said, her voice unwavering. The restaurant, a bookstore on weekends, and I tutor. He opened the folder, revealing photos of a community center. You founded Freedom Steps 6 years ago. A dance program for children with physical disabilities. He looked up, his expression unreadable. And it's about to close due to lack of funding. I didn't come here to ask for money, Mr. Montgomery, Diana stated simply. Then why did you come? Because you invited me. Richard smiled a humorless smile. Fair enough. I want you to work for me. Diana's calm exterior finally broke. As a waitress in your house? As a therapeutic companion for Lucas, he said, the name sounding foreign on his tongue. I have the best specialists in the country, but what you did yesterday was just a dance, and yet, it was the first time I've seen him truly smile since the accident. He motioned to a framed photo on his desk of a beautiful, smiling woman. My wife, Elizabeth, understood. It's not about fixing him. It's about letting him be. He looked at Diana, desperation in his eyes. I can pay you 5 times what you're making now. Diana stood up. No. Richard looked genuinely shocked. You're turning down a life-changing offer? Out of pride? Out of dignity, Diana corrected him. And because your son deserves more than someone hired to pretend to care. He doesn't need more experts. He needs space to lead his own life. She took a card from her purse and placed it on his desk. Freedom Steps classes are Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4 p.m. If you'd like to bring Lucas, the first class is free. 3 days later, a black Bentley pulled up to the weathered facade of a community center in the Bronx. Diana, who was at the front desk, saw Lucas in the back seat, his face pressed against the window. Richard remained in the driver's seat, his hands tight on the wheel. He's not coming in, said Diana's sister and co-founder, Zoe, who had just walked up. Men like him don't come to places like this. Diana smiled, remembering the look in Lucas's eyes during their brief dance. Don't underestimate a determined son. They watched as the car door opened. Lucas got out slowly, but then, to their complete surprise, Richard did too. He looked out of place, an obvious billionaire in casual clothes. What did you do? Zoe whispered, but Diana's eyes were sparkling with a secret joy. This was not a coincidence. This was the result of a plan she had been meticulously crafting for 4 months, ever since Richard Montgomery had rejected their funding proposal for Freedom Steps without even reading it. She had decided then and there that she wouldn't ask for help, she would make him see the value of her work. Inside, the studio was a lively chaos of adaptive movement. Children with various mobility devices moved freely to the rhythm of a light beat. It's not chaos, Diana said softly to a visibly uncomfortable Richard. It's structure. It's just not the one you recognize. She turned to Lucas. Would you like to join in? Lucas nodded, but his eyes darted to his father for permission. Go on, Richard said, his voice strained. I'll be right here. As Diana guided Lucas toward the other children, Zoe walked over to Richard. This isn't just therapy, she explained. It's a pilot rehabilitation program based on a revolutionary theory of movement autonomy. The studio door opened, and an older woman entered, leaning on an ornate cane. Zoe's eyes widened. That's Dr. Elaine Mercer, a retired neuroscientist from Harvard. Dr. Mercer greeted the children and then looked directly at Richard. Mr. Montgomery, you rejected my research proposal 3 times in the last 2 years. I'm surprised to see you here. Richard frowned. I thought this was just a dance class. We integrate adaptive dance with neuroscientific principles, Diana explained, returning to their side. Our program is co-authored by Dr. Mercer and me. I have an incomplete master's because I had to leave school to care for my sister, but my theoretical work is groundbreaking. The truth dawned on Richard. You knew who I was at the restaurant, he concluded. From the moment I walked in, Diana confirmed. And when Lucas got up to dance, I saw an opportunity to show, not tell. A group of reporters suddenly entered, cameras flashing. What is this? Richard's voice was pure ice. Part 2 of the plan? You used my son for a public relations stunt? Diana led him into a side room, where photos of dozens of children adorned the walls, each with handwritten progress statistics. On the last wall, an empty frame hung. That, she said, is our future. The full rehabilitation center we could build if we had the resources. 500 children a year instead of 50. Richard stood silently, cornered. Before him were 2 options: withdraw in anger and confirm his reputation as a cold, calculating man, or embrace the moment his son had created. Just then, Zoe rushed in. It's Lucas. They hurried back to the main studio. Lucas was in the center of the room, surrounded by the other children, the music off. He had removed one of his braces and was trying to balance on one leg. Lucas. Richard started forward, but Diana stopped him. Wait, she whispered. Watch. Lucas took a deep breath, focused, and then, to the amazement of everyone, especially his father, he took a complete, unsupported step. It was small, shaky, but entirely his own. The children cheered. Tears glistened in Richard's eyes. That's why we created Freedom Steps, Diana said softly. It's not about perfect steps. It's about the first steps on your own. Richard looked at his son, no longer seeing a problem to be managed, but a person discovering his own strength. He turned to the reporters, a new kind of composure settling over him. You know what's hardest for someone in my position? Richard addressed the crowd, his voice carrying through the room. Admitting we're wrong. He took a moment, a profound shift occurring within him. The Montgomery Foundation is pleased to announce a commitment to fully fund Freedom Steps for the next 5 years, and to build a permanent rehabilitation center based on the methodology developed by Dr. Mercer and M.S. Johnson. Camera flashes exploded. Zoe let out a cry of surprise. On one condition, Richard added, looking directly at Diana. That M.S. Johnson retains complete autonomy over the program. No corporate interference. 3 months later, bulldozers were clearing the ground for the new Freedom Steps Rehabilitation Center. Richard Montgomery, the man who had once tried to buy a solution, now sat in on board meetings, his face marked with new lines of humility and a newfound purpose. One afternoon, as they reviewed the architectural plans, Diana looked at him curiously. Is this part of your public penance, or do you really care? Richard pointed to a scientific article on his desk, covered in post-it notes. Lucas asked to have his second brace removed last week, he said, a quiet pride in his voice. His old physical therapist said that would be impossible for at least 2 years. He looked at Diana, a genuine smile on his face. Turns out, she was wrong. Just like I was. At the opening ceremony 6 months later, Lucas, now using only a light cane on difficult days, led a small, choreographed routine. His movements were limited, but flowed with a confidence no doctor had predicted. Richard watched from a distance. He doesn't need you to hold him anymore, Diana said, approaching him. No, Richard agreed, his gaze fixed on his son. But he still needs me to be around. That's a crucial difference. He turned to Diana, and for the first time, he offered a genuine, heartfelt apology. Thank you. For what you did. For what, exactly? She asked, a small smile playing on her lips. For teaching me how to follow. Richard Montgomery, the man who had once been defined by his power, now found his true purpose in the freedom of his son's first steps. And Diana Johnson, the waitress who had risked everything to honor a simple request, had not just changed a boy's life, but had taught a billionaire a lesson no amount of money could ever buy.